The courtroom was silent, so quiet you could hear the ticking of the judge's watch. All eyes were on the young nurse standing alone in front of the bench, dressed not in a suit, but in her wrinkled blue scrubs. She looked tired, pale. Her hands still had faint marks where gloves had dug into her skin. The judge narrowed his eyes and raised his voice. "Do you think this is how one should dress for court?" The nurse took a deep breath, then spoke just 12 words that made the room freeze and then rise to their feet in thunderous applause. Hit a like button and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you are watching from. Now, let's continue with the story. It was 6:15 a.m. when Emma pushed open the heavy glass doors of St. Grace Hospital. Her feet ached before her shift even started, and the last cup of coffee she had tasted like burnt water. But she smiled anyway. That's what she did, smile for her patients, for the scared children, the worried parents, and the lonely elderly who hadn't seen family in months. Emma Johnson had been a nurse for 7 years. She loved her job, even though it left her with little time for herself. Life wasn't easy. She worked night shifts, double shifts, holidays, whatever it took to help. She had no family in town. Her mother had passed away. Her younger brother was in college, and she paid most of his tuition from her small paycheck. That morning, Emma didn't expect anything different. Another long shift, another few patients saved. But as she left the hospital at 8:40 a.m., barely having time to grab her purse, she got a reminder text. Court hearing 9 a.m., room 204. Her stomach dropped. She had forgotten the court date. Her landlord had taken her to court over a misunderstanding about rent. She hadn't even had time to change out of her scrubs. With only minutes to spare, Emma rushed to the courthouse. Emma's heart raced as she stepped inside the courthouse. The hallway was cold and smelled faintly of old papers and floor polish. She clutched her small purse tightly, walking quickly toward courtroom 204. Her scrubs were wrinkled, her shoes stained. She hadn't even looked in a mirror, but she didn't care about appearances. She just wanted to explain herself, to tell the truth. Inside the courtroom, people whispered as she walked in. Heads turned, some eyebrows rose. She felt their judgment without anyone saying a word. Still, she kept her head up. The judge, a tall man in his 60s, with silver hair and glasses, glanced at her and paused. His nameplate read, Judge Harold Thompson. Case number 2387, the bailiff called. Emma Johnson versus Thomas Baker. Emma stepped forward. The judge looked her up and down. Miss Johnson, he said sternly, you do realize this is a courtroom, not a hospital ward. Emma froze. I came straight from my shift, Your Honor, she said softly. You didn't think it necessary to show this court the respect it deserves? The judge asked, louder now. Wearing hospital scrubs to a legal hearing is highly inappropriate. People in the room murmured again. Emma stood still. Her voice trembled, but she spoke clearly. Your Honor, I didn't have time to change, she said. I worked a 12-hour night shift. I delivered 3 babies, held the hand of a man who was dying, and helped a young girl breathe again after her lungs stopped. When my shift ended, I got your court notice reminder. I ran here without stopping. I'm sorry if I look unprepared. But I chose to show up anyway, because I believe in doing what's right, and I respect this court. The room went silent. Even the judge leaned back, surprised. Emma didn't cry, she didn't shout. She just stood there, her tired eyes looking directly into his. A woman sitting in the back whispered, She's a nurse? Another voice followed, God bless her. Judge Thompson blinked, then looked down at the papers before him. Slowly, he cleared his throat. Miss Johnson, he said, quieter now. "Can you tell us your side of the case?" Emma nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." She took a breath and explained that her landlord, Mr. Thomas Baker, had filed a case claiming she missed 2 months of rent. But Emma had proof. She had bank receipts and screenshots on her phone showing payments were made. The problem, she said, was that the landlord had changed bank accounts and failed to inform her properly. Judge Thompson read the documents she presented. As he did, he glanced at Emma again, at the faint red marks on her wrists, the small coffee stain on her pocket, the ID badge hanging from her collar that read Emma Johnson, RN. "Mr. Baker," the judge said, turning to the landlord, "did you notify her of your account change in writing?" Mr. Baker, a stout man with a scowl, shifted in his seat. "Well, I told her on the phone." "That's not written notice," the judge interrupted. Emma stayed silent. She wasn't there to attack. She only wanted fairness. After reviewing all the documents, the judge leaned back in his chair. He looked tired too, but thoughtful now. "Miss Johnson," he said, "the court finds that you have paid your rent, and the lack of written notice falls on the landlord. This case is dismissed." A pause. "Also," he added, voice softening, "I owe you an apology." Emma looked up, confused. "I judged you too quickly based on your appearance," he said, "but your actions, your services peaked louder than any outfit ever could." And just then, something unexpected happened. The courtroom rose. One by one, people stood up. They clapped. Not for a celebrity, not for a lawyer, for a tired nurse in blue scrubs. Emma stood there, frozen for a second. Then slowly she smiled. As the last few claps faded, the judge gavelled the courtroom gently. "Court is adjourned," he said. Emma started gathering her papers, still a little shaken from what had just happened. She wasn't used to standing ovations. Nurses weren't usually the ones people clapped for. They were usually too busy cleaning up messes, saving lives, or just listening to patients cry. As she turned to leave, the bailiff walked up quietly. "Miss Johnson," he said, "Judge Thompson would like a word with you in his chambers, if you're not too tired." Emma hesitated. She was tired, bone tired. But something about the judge's eyes had changed. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked human. She nodded. "Sure, I can stay a little longer." Zedes. Inside the judge's chambers, the office smelled of old books and polished wood. Shelves were lined with thick law books, and framed photos of the judge's family hung on the wall, smiling kids, a younger wife, a dog in one. Judge Thompson sat behind a big desk. This time, he wasn't looking down at her. He motioned to a seat. "Please sit." Emma sat. "I wanted to say thank you," he began, "not just for showing up today, but for what you do every day. I think I forgot how hard some people work, just to keep the world turning." Emma smiled politely. "I was just doing my job, sir." "Exactly," the judge said. "And it's people like you who remind the rest of us what real service looks like." He paused. "You see," he said, his voice softer now, "my wife, she passed away 2 years ago. Cancer. The nurses who cared for her wore scrubs just like yours. They were kind, strong. They made her feel like a person, not just a patient. And yet, here I was, judging you for wearing the uniform of an angel." Emma blinked back sudden tears. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said gently. "Thank you," the judge said. "You reminded me of them today. You reminded me of her." They sat in silence for a moment. Then the judge stood and walked to a shelf. He pulled out a small wooden box and opened it. "I don't give this to many people," he said, handing her a little silver pin in the shape of a scale. It's the court's honor pin, usually for lawyers, officers, or public servants who've gone above and beyond. Today, I'd like to give it to you." Emma held the pin in her palm. Her hands trembled. "Thank you," she whispered. "No," the judge said. "Thank you." The next morning, Emma returned to work at St. Grace Hospital. She didn't think much about the court case anymore. She had patients to care for, charts to fill, and little ones to cheer up. But as she walked through the hospital doors, something was different. People were smiling at her more than usual. One doctor gave her a thumbs up. A receptionist whispered, "You're amazing, Emma." Emma was confused. Then she saw it, her face on a small news page, open on the receptionist's computer screen. Nurse in scrubs silences judge with 12 powerful words. Her speech in court had been recorded by someone in the audience and posted online. Within hours, it had gone viral. She scrolled down the article. Thousands of comments poured in. "This is the kind of hero we need." I cried reading this. God bless every nurse out there. Emma, you are our reminder that dignity comes in all uniforms. Emma's cheeks turned pink. She hadn't asked for fame. She just wanted to be heard. But now, people were listening. A week later, Emma got a call from the hospital director. "We'd like to honor you," he said. "At our staff appreciation dinner this Friday night, you've become a symbol of grace under pressure, Emma. Everyone's talking about you." Emma was quiet for a moment. I'm not used to that kind of attention," she said honestly. "Exactly why you deserve it," he replied with a chuckle. That Friday night, the hospital auditorium sparkled with fairy lights. Doctors, nurses, janitors, volunteers all gathered for food, music, and a little celebration. But when Emma walked in, something unexpected happened. Applause. Again. Just like in the courtroom, people stood up. They clapped. Some even whistled. Emma wore a simple dress, not scrubs this time, but she still had the silver court pin on her chest. Her best friend Maya, also a nurse, leaned over and whispered, "Girl, you're famous now. Better start signing autographs." Emma laughed nervously. "Don't you dare." When her name was called to the stage, Emma stepped up, still not fully believing this was all for her. The director gave a short speech calling her the soul of St. Grace, and then handed her a framed certificate titled the Heart of Healing Award. Then the director said, "We also have a special guest tonight who asked to say a few words." Emma turned, and there he was, Judge Harold Thompson. He stepped up to the microphone. No robe this time, just a dark suit and a gentle look in his eyes. "I've spent my whole career looking for the truth," he began, "but a week ago the truth walked into my courtroom wearing scrubs." The audience chuckled softly. "I judged her," he continued, "for her appearance. I forgot what courage looks like when it's tired and what real strength looks like when it's quiet." He turned to Emma. "You reminded me, and I'm grateful." Emma's eyes sparkled. She wasn't used to public speeches or public praise, but something inside her was changing. She was learning how powerful one voice can be. After the event, as she stepped off the stage, a small hand tugged at her dress. She turned to see a little girl, maybe 9 years old, holding her mum's hand. "Are you the nurse from the video?" the girl asked. Emma smiled. "Yes, I am." The girl beamed. "I want to be just like you when I grow up." Emma knelt down and took the girl's hand. "You can be," she said gently. "Just be kind, be brave, and never let anyone tell you you don't belong." Weeks passed. The buzz from the courtroom and hospital event slowly settled, but Emma's life had changed in quiet, powerful ways. She was still working long shifts, still helping patients sit up in bed, still holding hands during hard moments. But now, something was different. People saw her. They smiled more. They said, "Thank you." And young nurses started stopping her in the hallway, asking for advice, asking how to be stronger, how to speak up with kindness, just like she did that day in court. The hospital director noticed. One afternoon, he called Emma into his office again. "We've started getting calls," he said, "from schools and colleges. Nursing programs want to hear from you. They're inspired." Emma blinked. "Me? What would I say?" He smiled. "Just tell your story. Be yourself. That's more than enough." Holiday. First school visit. Emma stood nervously in front of 30 high school students, most of them in uniforms, some half asleep, some whispering. She was holding a photo of her old nursing school graduation, her palms sweaty. But when she began speaking, the room got quiet. "I never planned to go viral," she said with a small smile. "I never planned to speak in court. I just planned to show up, tired, in scrubs, and do my job." She told them about that morning in court, the judgment, the moment she decided to speak, the surprise applause, the little girl who wanted to become a nurse. By the time she finished, one of the teachers had tears in her eyes. And then clapping. Again. It wasn't loud or fancy, but it was real, the kind that comes from the heart. Afterward, a shy student came up to her and said, "I didn't think I was brave enough to be a nurse, but now, maybe I am." Emma gently touched the girl's shoulder. "You are," she said. "You just don't know it yet." Back at the hospital, Emma started a weekly mentoring group for new nurses. Every Thursday evening, they'd sit in the break room, sharing stories, fears, and small victories. Emma didn't pretend to be perfect. She just listened, encouraged, reminded them they mattered. Her group grew from 5 to 15, then more. Even doctors and hospital aides began dropping in to listen. People weren't just hearing her story anymore, they were living it too. They were standing up for each other, for kindness, for respect. And all of it started because one woman stood in court, wearing scrubs, and spoke the truth. It was a rainy Thursday morning when the letter came. Emma opened it with a yawn, her coffee in one hand and her overnight bag still at her feet from her shift. The letter was thick, with a gold seal at the top. She read the first line, and her eyes widened. "You are formally invited to be the keynote speaker at the National Nurses and Healthcare Heroes Conference in Washington, D.C. She read it again, and again. Then she sat down slowly. She had never even been on a plane before. A few weeks later, Emma stood backstage in a giant hall with bright lights and cameras, looking out at hundreds of chairs filled with nurses, doctors, students, and leaders from all over the country. She was dressed neatly, this Timino scrubs, but the silver pin Judge Thompson had given her still shone on her chest. Her palms were sweaty again, just like they had been back in that high school classroom. But this time, she wasn't nervous because she was afraid. She was nervous because she wanted to honor all the other nurses who never got a microphone, who never got applause. A woman stepped up beside her, holding a clipboard. "Miss Emma Johnson," she asked. Emma smiled. "That's me. You're on in 30 seconds. They're all excited to hear you speak." Emma took a deep breath and then walked onto the stage. The lights were bright, but the room was silent. Emma stood at the podium, looked out at the faces watching her, and began. "I was once scolded in court for wearing scrubs." A ripple of whispers moved through the crowd. She smiled softly. But I wasn't there to impress anyone. I was there because a child needed help. And sometimes, being present just, showing is the bravest thing you can do. She shared her story, the courtroom moment, the judge's apology, the little girl who tugged on her dress, the mentoring group, the schools. Then she paused. "I'm not a hero," she said quietly. "I'm just one nurse. But nurses are everywhere, quiet, tireless, brave, and sometimes all they need is for someone to see them." The audience sat still for a beat, then the first clap, then another, and suddenly the room was on its feet cheering. It wasn't about fame. It was about truth, respect, dignity, the kind you wear, no matter what uniform you have on. As Emma stepped off the stage, wiping her eyes, she found a note waiting for her at the table with a small bouquet of white lilies. It was handwritten with neat block letters. "You reminded us all why we started this work. Thank you for carrying the torch with grace. Heech." Her smile widened. Judge Harold Thompson. He'd sent her flowers. Emma returned home to her small apartment late that Sunday night. She was exhausted, but her heart was full. As she opened her front door, she noticed something taped to it, a small envelope with her name written in colorful crayon. She smiled and opened it right there in the hallway. Inside was a simple drawing, a nurse with a cape like a superhero standing in front of a crowd. Below it, in big letters, were the words, "Thank you for being my hero, love, Chloe." Emma gasped. Chloe's little girl from court. There was an address on the back. Emma knew what she had to do. The next day, Emma drove across town and knocked on the door of a small brick house. Chloe's mother opened it, surprised. "Emma?" she said, hand on her chest. "Oh my goodness, you didn't have to." Emma smiled warmly. "I wanted to. May I say hi?" "Of course. Please come in." Inside, Chloe ran to the door and hugged Emma tightly. "You got my drawing," she squealed. Emma knelt down to her eye level. "I did, and it's going on my wall forever." Chloe's mother looked at Emma with tears in her eyes. "You didn't just save Chloe that day. You gave me strength too. I was scared and ashamed, but you stood tall when we couldn't." Emma's throat tightened. "You two gave me courage," she whispered. "We all helped each other." Over the next few months, the story kept spreading. Local clinics saw more volunteers sign up. High school students asked more about nursing. Teachers used Emma's speech in class. One day, a mural appeared on a brick wall near the hospital. It showed a woman in scrubs, standing proudly, a soft smile on her face, with words painted above her. "Real heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear scrubs." Emma stood quietly in front of it one evening after her shift, watching as a little girl pointed at the painting and whispered to her mum, "That's Nurse Emma." It was her, but it was more than her. It was for all the nurses, for everyone who ever felt unseen. One quiet evening, Emma sat on her couch with a cup of tea when her mail arrived. Among the letters was one with the court's official seal. It was from Judge Harold Thompson. Inside, a short note read, "You turned a moment of judgment into a lifetime of purpose. You changed me. You changed many. Thank you, Emma. Never stop speaking up with kindness, always." Emma folded the letter slowly, placing it beside the others in her small memory box labeled, "The Day Everything Changed." A year had passed since that unforgettable courtroom moment. Emma's life was still full of early mornings, long shifts, sore feet, and late-night coffee. But now, her days were also filled with something more: speeches, school visits, mentorship meetings, and quiet letters from people she had never met. Then one morning, something extraordinary happened. She was walking through the hospital hallway when her supervisor called her aside with a big grin. "There's something you need to see," he said. He led her to a quiet corner of the hospital lobby that had been under renovation for months. Emma had barely noticed it in the rush of her daily duties. But now, the wall was uncovered. There, standing tall and proud in a beautiful glass case, was a life-sized bronze statue of a nurse in scrubs. Her stance was calm, confident, with a stethoscope around her neck and a look of quiet strength. It was modeled after Emma. Below the statue was a small plaque that read, "In honor of Nurse Emma Johnson, who reminded the world that dignity wears scrubs." Emma covered her mouth in shock. Visitors passing by paused to read. Some took pictures. Others stood and stared in silence. A few nurses nearby wiped away tears. One young girl, no older than 8, tugged on her mother's hand and whispered, "Mama, I want to be like her." Emma turned, eyes glassy, heart full. Her voice had made waves. But her kindness? That had built a legacy. Later that evening, Emma stood outside the hospital under a soft orange sunset. She looked up at the statue again, then down at her own, scrubs faded, a little wrinkled, just like always. She smiled to herself. It had never been about being perfect. It had always been about showing up, caring, standing for other 7 when no one asked her to. As she turned to head back in for another shift, she whispered quietly, "For every nurse who thinks no one sees them, they do now." And with that, she walked back through the hospital doors. Head high, heart open, a hero in scrubs. If you love powerful courtroom dramas, shocking legal battles, and stories where justice wins, you're in the right place. Like this video, if you believe in fighting for the truth, comment below what was the most powerful moment of this case. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an explosive legal showdown. More gripping cases are coming soon, don't miss out.